that I really like is Chandelier by Sia. So I'll go through this song and this video, and I really like using official videos because they tell such a deep story that the lyrics alone don't really do justice. So we'll go ahead and start with this one. So she begins this video with a child sort of hanging in a doorway, with her arms spread apart, or her feet spread apart, and then she comes down. The reason why is a child can dance. A child can do whatever the child wants to do in the scriptural world. It's like Jesus when he rebuked his disciples for keeping the children away, and he had to tell them, "Hey, look, the only way to me is as a child. That's the only way to get to Jesus." So it's sort of fascinating to see how that works. But that's what Sia is portraying here. And the other idea with the kid is using a skin tone leotard, and the idea is dancing naked, like King David danced naked in the streets, to the dismay of his wife, daughter of King Saul. So he had to put the ark in a pitched tent. So the idea is darkened tent. That concept ends up being a place to sleep. So notice this video is set up in a bedroom, or at least it begins in a bedroom. The video continues on into other parts of the apartment, but the idea is the bedroom. That's where it starts. So after that, the video gets into 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, and the idea is this successive form of spiritual regeneration. I guess the best way to look at that is the patterns that are used all throughout the Bible are a series of 3 that result in a 4th. So I think one of the most prominent examples of that is the gospel accounts. So you have the 3 synoptic gospels, and then you have the Gospel of John. So it's like the 3 come together ultimately for the most clarity. In John, it's the longest, it's got the most detail, it's got the fewest parables. That's kind of the idea. So I think of that with the 1, 2, 3, drink. The other thing that she says is she's going to swing from the chandeliers, and then the idea of swinging from the chandelier is going from star to star. So chandelier's got lights, and that's sort of the way the riddles work. Is it's about what's not said. So a chandelier's got lights. It's going to be on at night. So that's kind of the idea. And she breaks into this song about keeping her glass full as she flies through the night. And that's kind of the idea behind discipleship, I guess is the best way to say it. Is like Jesus woke his disciples up in the Garden of Gethsemane 3 times because they kept falling asleep. And what Sia is saying is she's not going to fall asleep. She's not going to close her eyes, but she's also not going to look back. And she can't look back or look down, which is why she has her long bangs covering her eyes, or she's always got her eyes covered so you can't see them. But the child, you can see the child's eyes in this particular video, which is interesting. So one of the most prominent things that she says is that she's going to live like tomorrow doesn't exist. So I think of Revelation 9:6, where it says that some people will want to die, but they can't. Jesus also taught that some people won't taste death until the second coming. And the reason why she says that she doesn't want, or she's going to live like tomorrow doesn't exist, is because she's hoping tomorrow doesn't exist. Like the movie Groundhog Day, she doesn't want it to rinse and repeat over and over again. It goes back to when Jesus taught his disciples about the child who kept going from fire to water, fire to water, fire to water. It's like a baptism to hell, baptism to hell, baptism to hell. They can't figure it out. And Jesus said the only way out of this is through fasting and prayer. And the point behind that is fasting is the vow of the Nazarite, and Jesus does that. He fulfills that for us. That's the concept. But the idea is he also taught other people how to do that, how to accomplish it. And that's the point that Sia is sort of conveying here, is the fasting is not looking back, not partaking, not drinking of the drink during the night. And she even says that in this song, to let it go. And she flies like a bird through the night, so like an angel through the night, and her tears dry. And her tears dry because they're healed. Like the pain goes away after the night. So upon waking up, you're better and you're healed. And that's kind of the full cycle, the full circle. And she's living like tomorrow doesn't exist, and that's the point. It's my belief that almost everything in videos like this are on purpose, and it's a riddle to be solved. So one of the things that is interesting in Mark 10, the mother of James and John asks for James and John to sit on Jesus' left and right hand. And the idea is Jesus is in the mercy seat, so he's going to cast judgment, and then the left hand and the right hand are the two sides, and one has to fail. It's judgment. So one is good, one is bad, that type of thing. But what Jesus said in response is, hey, look, that's not for me to decide. That's already been prepared. And Jesus came to divide. So what happens is James and John are divided, so that they can sort of witness each other. That's sort of the epic backstory. So when the child in Sia's video does a split and says 1, 2, 3, drink, 1, 2, 3, drink, it goes back, in my mind at least, to the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus says, can you drink of this cup? And they said that they can, and Jesus says, you will. So it's 1, 2, 3, James, John, Jesus, 1, 2, 3, drink, and they will drink. All three will. And that's kind of the idea. It's also, think of the three crosses on Calvary. They all of this ties back together. So the child does the splits. Well, the reason why, in my mind, is because that's the idea of division. So the feet are, in Ezekiel's temple pattern, the feet point east. So when the feet are east, they're together. So eventually Jesus splits the feet. And that's the idea of John 21, and 22, where Jesus is asked, how long that person's going to be left behind, and that person being John, how long is John going to be left behind? So that's the division played out in the Gospel of John. But I believe that's what Sia is trying to convey with this particular video, or that segment. Towards the end of the video, the child's pointing at the wall and then lays down on the floor. But the idea of the wall is also depicted in the book of Ezekiel, and it's about picking your way through it, or digging a hole through the wall and going through. But the idea behind that is the wall is also the law, and the law of division is what can't be breached. So that's the chasm that the people can't find their way through. And that's what she's sort of depicting here. So the child lays down on the floor, pointing fingers, and pointing fingers is the idea of the law. It's the unforgiveness that maintains the division. So as long as you can't forgive, as long as you don't forgive, then the law remains, and that's the idea. So then she lays on the floor and she's pointing up, and that's kind of the transitional point of casting blame, to your peer, then to the sky. So think of the heavenly host, or think of God, think of Jesus, whatever you want to think about there. But the idea is that wall remains, and it transitions from being a peer to being heavenly versus the created. And remember, Jesus came to divide. He came to tear down the temple walls, and if he succeeds at that, then there are going to be unhappy people about it. Overarching message as I dig into musicians and kind of what they're going through, and the lyrics and the message that they've got in their videos, is the idea of parables. Jesus taught only in parables, and that maintained divisions. It also maintained protection. So what people don't want is to be cut again. So Sia sings about that in her song Elastic Heart. The idea is, your blade may be too sharp. I've got an elastic heart, but your blade may be too sharp. So the point is, she can collect and collect and collect, and she can hold on through the night, but she knows that if somebody wakes up at the wrong time or does the wrong thing, then they have the ability to cast somebody out. And think of Joshua with the flint knife in the book of Joshua. So he's responsible for circumcision, and Joshua is another name for Jesus. And Joshua was the one to usher people into the promised land, because Moses couldn't. Moses struck the rock a second time instead of speaking to it. So Joshua had to come in as the word. So you must align Joshua with Jesus in this regard, because that was how Jesus worked. He cut people off through circumcision, and the knife is the blade of the sword, and that sword maintains the division between the created and in the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden is protected from all sides on the east, and that's sort of the point of the feet being protected. So those in Egypt or in desolation are protected by that knife, and that's what Sia is talking about in her other song. But that is also alluded to in this song.